why you have some effects of like influenced by sponsorship.
And then, can you tell me the importance of being able to activate offline as well as online in terms of the fan engagement piece, and the digital and the event-based activations as well?
I think that really depends on maybe the subpopulation of interest, right? You might have like older fans that are sort of less online. So like for those, and also in generally speaking, like correlationally speaking, right? They also are fans that tend to have like higher incomes, the ones that sort of like go to the matches more, right? So having sort of activation strategies that are sort of built into sort of like that offline fan experience are incredibly important. And again, at least what the data tells you is that's where most of the value is, right? On the online side, right, that's potentially a bit easier just because it's like potentially cheaper, right? Like social media is like this amazing tool where you can just blast messages out to everybody for like incredibly cheap prices. If you really have a really good marketing targeting strategy, you can be like hyper specific or hyper focused with your targeting to get like achieve like really, really high return on investment on your ad spend. So both sort of are important, but I think the key difference is they're targeting like different types of fans.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for that. That was really good. Enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Just one more point of clarification probably, but when you went through the 32 million, one of the early slides of like is that like the inherent value that you think is being delivered on top of the partnership?
Yes, that would be like additional value on top of the partnership. And that's like, to be more precise, that's like potential value as opposed to realizable value, right? It's like very difficult for us to sort of specifically model like how effective this particular strategy will be for this like particular group of users. So that represents more like an unrealistic upper bound. But like realistically, reasonably, you might get like 20, 30, 40% of that value.
So it could be the justification for a higher ceiling of a deal, for example.
Yeah.
If activated correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and also with that, like if you think about sponsorship, the more money you give, the more ability you have access to some of these like perks that really might activate like this group of users.
I think that's yes. Yeah, we're all good. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the first team, and now introducing Cooper Hurd as the second presentation of the night.
Hey folks, y'all hear me all right? Awesome. So y'all more or less understand the project that we're looking at. We are trying to pitch an airline sponsorship based on sports fans of a specific club. I acknowledge that this is the MIT Sports Conference. We have the best and the brightest in terms of analytics and sports minds here, so I didn't really want to compete in terms of head-on, more of a holistic approach. I try to take a very narrow focus in this project, and specifically I'm looking at our fans that I labeled as power flyers. So I guess a little bit about me, 4 years as a data analyst, so that's sort of my realm, not as much of the data science. I very much like taking the data and trying to find insights off of it. I was recently laid off, so hashtag open to work. Find me on LinkedIn, Cooper Hurd. Again, narrow focus, I honed in on these power flyers. This is our 95th percentile of folks in terms of the number of flights taken. I'll go ahead and spoil it for you. We're talking about folks that have taken 18 or more flights in the given year in this data sample, which more flights than I can imagine going on. But these are folks that are flying very often. And the main goals that I want to show that these flyers are a very prime group, very ripe for conversion, and show that these a profitable group for conversion, as well as that these flyers tend to be hardcore fans that are going to have a lot of exposure to our advertisements. Methodology, most of this is done in R, ggplot, dplyr. So it's mostly basic stats, correlation analysis, nothing too advanced, but your basic statistics. This is just to give a little bit of background, I would say. This is looking at the fans themselves. We were given that column that this previous group mentioned, the influence by sponsorship. that's more or less the answer to this question, right? We want to sell a sponsorship, so we want to find what leads to fans being most influenced by sponsorships. And the main thing that I would point to, again, there's nobody that was particularly, you don't see any correlations that are 90%, 50% even. These are pretty minor correlations, but these ones that get highlighted are almost all tied to being a pretty hardcore fan. So merch spin, social media follower, season ticket holder, matches attended, right? That all correlates to being a pretty serious fan of the team. In terms of some flight data, the two main classifications that we had in terms of what's going to bring in profit based on a single flight, your airline loyalty tier, where you're a platinum member versus a basic or a non-loyalty member, and your travel class, again, a first up flight versus an economy flight. Biggest correlation we saw there was actually the number of flights taken per year, which is very fascinating and something that I'm going to talk about later on. But the idea that your power flyers, who I'll talk about that a little bit more, but the fact that these folks are flying more and that they spend more per flight is a massive deal. That means that you are getting almost an exponential value with these folks as opposed to getting converting a customer that flies once or twice per year and is more likely to be spending less money per flight. So just a little bit more of, again, what I'm considering the background data. This is just an example of flights from London to Boston. It's difficult to find just an easy database of flight data. The numbers that I have are a little bit different in terms of going up a level in class, but I was seeing something more along the lines of, a single level increase can double your value in terms of how much people are spending on a flight. And if you're going from economy all the way up to first class, that's going to be around 5 to 6 times as much as the data that I was seeing. So if you can convert these folks to higher travel classes, that's a very big deal. My recommendation, again, you want to target these power flyers within our audience. These fans, which there are 2,200 approximately fans that are in that 95th percentile, these are our power flyers. These are folks that are far more likely to book an upgraded seat. You'll see in this, again, economy versus premium versus economy plus, a little bit dubious, but when you look at economy versus first class, I mean, we're looking at 50% of our power flyers are booking first class seats. And when we're talking about folks that are booking an average of 25 flights in a given year, we're not just talking about 1 or 2 flights. We're talking about 25 flights that are being booked half the time on first class, which is 6 times more valuable than someone that's in an economy seat. So these folks that are booking 1, 2, 3, 4 flights, they're valuable customers. They're fans of our team. We care about them. But in terms of this specific project, a very valuable class to target are these power flyers. Again, I'm not the smartest man in this room, but I can tell when the big purple bar gets up, that's a good thing. Again, 2,200 people flying 18 or more times per year. Those are our power flyers. This is 4 times as many flights as that 75th percentile. So this data is very much weighted towards folks that are taking only a couple of flights. This top 5% of flyers is taking far more flights, again, 4 times more than even that 75th percentile. This 5% of flyers takes over a quarter of the total flights, and they are making up 64% of our first class seats. When you look at those demographics too, again, if there are 2 points I want to make, it's that these power flyers pay more per flight. And the second point, when you look at these demographics, these folks tend to be fans of our team. They're hardcore fans of our team. 57% self-report as diehard fans of the team. 84% are season ticket holders. Again, one thing that's important to note, and on that slide I showed with the flight data, folks in a higher income bracket tend to spend more on their plane tickets, tend to spend more on loyalty. So again, having money means you spend more money. I'm not breaking any ground with that, but it is very important to note, again, these folks, 7.9 out of 10 on their interest in the team. And again, this is all about a sponsorship deal. We're trying to sell you so that you can pay us money so that you make more money, right? This is a symbiotic relationship. These folks are higher than average in terms of their value of the sponsorship, their influence of the sponsorship. That 6.5 number is very important. When you look at these power flyers, this is a small group, 2,200 out of the approximately 50,000 that we had, but you don't need to convert many of them to have a substantial return on your advertising campaign. When you convert 1% of that group, that's 22 people you need to convert. You're looking at $1.2 million gross return in terms of the estimates that I've got in terms of these flights. Again, flights are a flight from here up to Vancouver is going to be a lot different than a flight from here to London. But just giving a basic estimate, again, I've got the data listed out there, $1.2 million approximately if you're converting 22 people. If you convert 10% of that, you're looking at $12 million. I mean, this is a ton of money that's sitting on the table for a very small number of people that you actually need to convert. So just to wrap up, I think the couple of points that I want to hammer home, again, if you're going to take anything away from this, power flyers fly more often and they spend more money on flights. That's why this group is so important to target. They are spending the most money, not just because they fly it the most, but because they spend the most per flight. This is an incredibly profitable group to try to convert. And number two, why do we want to target those power flyers? Because they spend the most money. Number two, how does that tie into the fandom? That's the whole thing we're looking at, right? These sports fans, why do you need to sponsor our team as an airline? Because these power flyers tend to be our biggest fans. They're hardcore fans of the team. I mean, when we saw those demographics, the vast majority of them are season ticket holders. They care about the team, they're showing up to games, they're in the stadiums, they're supporting our team, they're loyal fans. And the third thing I really want to point to, again, how are we going to actually advertise to these folks? I think that one of the biggest things you want to point to is trying to create this positive feedback loop where you're incentivized to go to games and that any promotions that you're running, rewarding game attendance with miles on your flights. In the same way, you want to reward taking a flight with something in the game, right? Maybe if you take a certain number of flights, you get a jersey for the team. I'm not an advertising guru. I'm sure there are people that could come up with great strategies for this, but the biggest thing that I would recommend from a data perspective is create that positive feedback loop where going to a game incentivizes you to take flights with our airline, incentivizes you to go to more games. That's the loop in question. A couple of more specific things. I think you should advertise within the stadium. I think that, again, our fans are going to these games. They're season ticket holders. They're in the stadium very often, despite apparently being on 25 flights per year, which is, again, unfathomable to me, but I don't like planes. I think the biggest thing I want to point to, again, these fans care about our team. They are loyal to the team. If you can prove that you're loyal to our team, they will be loyal to you. These are loyal fans. They care about our team. If you can show that you care about our team, they will care about you. They will provide that value back. I think that's more than anything what I want you to take away is that a long-term commitment to our team is going to provide long-term value because our most dedicated fans are the ones that are going to provide you the most profit. So thank you all.
Thanks, Cooper. That was really good as well. Very much like the narrow focus on the power flyer, and get the 1% conversion when you break it down to 22 people switching. Mm-hmm. My only concern is that people that fly that much must be really loyal to their airline, so they might not switch to the new airline potentially. But in your analysis, did you have anything about the value of, say, the younger people coming up? Like, how could we identify the next generation of the power flyer, knowing that they're 40 to 50 and a certain demographic, go to X amount of games?
Yeah, I would say that was not much of a focus of what I was looking at. Again, sort of identifying that as sort of your business class of flyers, that 40 to 50 range. I think that's a totally valid concern that they are probably to an extent set in their ways. But what I would say is that if you can convert these folks, like you're saying, they are loyal to a brand, but that means that once you've converted, they're going to be loyal to your brand. And these are folks that are 40 to 50 years old. They're going to be loyal to you for another 20, 30 years, right? So yeah, I think that's a very reasonable thing to say, that it's going to be a difficult, they're going to be pretty sticky probably already. They're showing that they're loyal. That's why they're at our game so often. But I think that it's worth the investment because if you can convert them, it is such a huge amount of money that you're looking at.
Thanks, Cooper. You got a question? No?
I do, but after.
Okay. Around some of the Hello? You mentioned around some of the recommendations in terms of the importance of advertising in at event. Is there a particular reason why you hadn't focused on the online piece? Do you feel like there's an opportunity there where you could engage with more of a global fan base who obviously travel long distances to go and watch their favourite teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's just a limitation in terms of scope. In this specific instance, I focused a lot on those diehard local fans. So I think that there's obviously, again, we're in a digital world. We're in a global economy, especially when we're talking about sports. So yeah, I think there's a ton of value there. That's something I would love to look at in the future. But I think that specifically looking at these power flyers, being able to get these folks are averaging over 15 games attended, which is the main reason I wanted to focus on those in-game advertisements. Even just having a billboard where they see your name very often is going to imprint that in their brain. They're going to remember that next time they book a flight.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very good. So with that in mind, so my question is a build on both what Tom asked you and what Dean asked you. And what would your offer be to someone who's flying 25 times a year? Right, so you're going to advertise there, but what are you going to say to them that is different about what you're offering, the loyalty that you're hoping they would exhibit in switching? So they're used to the game, they're used to the show. They've probably built up a fair amount of, when they're not buying first class tickets, they're getting upgraded, right? So what would be your messaging versus just saying British Airways or, whatever, Alitalia, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you can point to is a rewards program that ties in with your team. Again, I think this is a very good point that these folks tend to be sticky with their airlines. They're already pretty invested. But there's no reason that I think that once we've convinced you to switch, you can be building up, again, once you're with our airline, you're going to be there for several years. And I think that, again, the idea of the positive feedback loop where the more often, it shouldn't just be that going to our games incentivizes you to go on flights, right? Whatever those miles, I think that's a great thing. But also if you can, again, these are sports fans first and foremost. That's what this data set is, right? You're trying to sell the airlines on these sports fans. If you can convince the sports fans that going on these flights with your airline more often is going to get them whatever it is, better tickets, VIP access, a free jersey, whatever it is, I think that that's the main strategy that you want to look at is, again, in that loop, less of the actual games gets you benefits on the flights, but more that the flights gets you benefits for the games.
Yeah. So maybe it ends up being advertising plus so that you can tell that story.
I would defer to the advertisers on this one, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Cooper.
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Cooper. And I would now like to invite our last team competing in the open division to the stage, Ben Jenkins and Harry Engoven.
Thank you. Cool. Cool. Yeah. Is it working? Where's the slide? Okay, cool. Yeah, so my name is Ben, and this is Harry, and we're excited to present our analysis with you guys. And so the goal was to help unlock the commercial value of fandom. And so we started by analyzing the 50,000 sport fans across various clusters to understand what are the high value segments, what are the potential strategic partnerships, opportunities for an airline, what are some behavioral insights we can to enhance customer acquisition and travel frequency, and lastly, we did revenue modeling based on fan behavior. So we want to provide a realistic estimate over a wide range of assumptions to provide sort of insights into the expected return of targeting these specific users. And so we started with our methodology. We first wanted to segment users into different clusters. The logic behind that is different customers provide different value, and we wanted to take an approach that allows us to identify these distinct clusters and be able to identify sort of what their value is and be able to specifically target these subset of users. So we used K-means clustering to apply to segment fans. We looked at travel frequency, engagement with sponsorships, airline loyalty, spending behavior, as well as income level. And so this segmentation process allowed us to identify two specific clusters as very high value segments for partnership opportunities. Next, we did revenue modeling and simulation, and so we started with base revenue calculation, and that's just defined as revenue per flight based on travel class, and then we adjusted revenue with a loyalty bonus and sponsorship influence. Lastly, we did Monte Carlo simulations, and so what this allows us to do is run thousands of simulations to help model expected annual revenue based on various assumptions that we made based on research as well as based on research. And so we looked at flight frequency variations as well as spending behavior adjustments. And so here's the result of our clustering. So we can see on the right figure, we found the optimal number to be 4. And so this means that this helps minimize the inertia, and so we found this was a good way to separate the segments. So we found it useful to visualize our clusters, and what I want you to pay attention to is the green and the yellow clusters, which is cluster 2 and 3, so 2 is in green. What we found was that this green cluster is very distinct in the data set, and these represent frequent flyers, premium spenders, high income, and their airline loyal fans. And next, we found cluster 3 in yellow. They are mid-income, silver tier, loyal airline members, and premium economy flyers. And so one of our key insights from customer segment analysis is that cluster 2 typically takes 20 flights a year, which is significantly more than cluster 1 or 2, where that only takes typically 1 or 2 flights a year. Now, another really important thing to look at is that cluster 2 and 3 are highly influenced, greater than 6 value, with sponsorship influence. And so if we're able to actually attract these customers, there's a greater likelihood we're going to generate some revenue there. Lastly, they tend to attend more games. And so why this is important, this is a measure of their fandom. And so if they attend more games, it's likely that we'll be able to generate more revenue from these people. And so what we found was cluster 2 and 3 are the most valuable, but on the other hand, they're actually the smallest number in the groups. And so what we did here is we wanted to now identify what are the particular return we can get. And so we ran various simulations. And so these simulations account for neutral, optimistic, and pessimistic scenarios to arrive at a more realistic insight. So we don't want a single number. We want kind of a probability distribution. And so next we can look at the mean market size by cluster. We find that the cluster 2 and 3 have a mean market size of $6 million, but they have a greater uncertainty, but they provide significant value. And next we can look at the expected revenue. So now that we know what the market size is, we want to run Monte Carlo simulations to identify the mean expected revenue. And we find that to be $900 to $1 million for these clusters. Lastly, we made an interactive app. And what this app allows you to do is to enter various parameters. So for example, flights per year, sponsorship, matches a game, merchandise spend and fandom, travel class, loyalty tier, and income bracket. And allows you to simulate a user so you can better understand how this affects it. And so if you predict the cluster, this user in this example is predicted to be customer segment 3. And remember I said 3 is one of the most important that we should target, as well as we get a conservative estimated annual revenue from this individual user as $20. And we have the high end, $390. So this kind of shows the potential range of return you can get from this one user. And so this approach can be extended to the entire data set. So we only have 50,000 users. If we had millions or 2 million, you can apply this and kind of get a better idea of what to expect.
Cool. Thanks, Ben, for sort of setting the stage. So now that we have some identification of what these high-value fan segments are, we can talk about like what recommendations we might make and how we might target these people. So one thing that we looked at was we have these frequent flyers in fan segment 3. And so we want to look, as you'll remember, those are people that are sort of mid-loyalty to the airline. And so we want to see how can we potentially gather more revenue from these people, from these fans. So we ran some different things. We sliced the data a couple different ways. And what we saw is, as you can see in that top left chart, fan segment 3 is taking a lot of flights per year, and they have a lot of disposable income. So kind of what can we do with that? We see that in terms of their engagement with the team, we see that they're primarily physically engaged. And so what we do with that is we sort of can think of some sort of loyalty program. So this loyalty program might take form of, the more you travel with this airline, the more rewards you can get. I'll get to that in a second. The more you spend with the team, the more rewards you can get for the airline. So if you are a season ticket holder, you might get a lump sum of miles that encourages you to travel with this airline, which may sort of move you from these sort of basic loyalty tiers up to a higher loyalty tier for the airline that we choose to partner with. This could also, again, we talk about physical engagement. This could be purchases on site in the stadium. This could be other interactions within the stadium, basically things like concession stands, merchandise purchases. We've seen that these fans have the income to do this, and we also see that they spend money on merchandise for the team. So we know they're likely to do this, so we're hoping to sort of catch these fans and bring them into more loyal airline customers. As I sort of stumbled over, you can also sort of flip this on its head. So maybe you can sort of encourage airline affinity by offering rewards that you can then redeem for team merchandise and like fan experiences. So again, we've seen that these high-value clusters, they have high incomes, they have high loyalty, they're big fans, and they like to buy merchandise. So how can we encourage that loyalty and foster that loyalty with the airline? By bringing them in, the more they travel, the more rewards they earn. These can create those high-value experiences, VIP things, meet the players, things like that, tour of the field, the locker rooms. And sort of this can sort of wed the fandom for the team as with the fandom for the airline. So now to kind of take a step back, some alternative approach. What we noticed was just like looking at the data overall was that there's not a lot of digital engagement in these fans. And you don't have to, yesterday we talked about Real Madrid, and they're the most valuable team in the world according to Forbes. And just looking that up, you see they're being applauded for their digital marketing strategy. They have a partnership with Emirates, another airline, that accounts for 31% of their total digital engagement. And we can see how valuable that is in the real world. I've only been at this conference for a morning, but Tom talked about the partnership of Tottenham Hotspur with AIA. And you can sort of see how these wedding of these two organizations, these partnerships, can sort of be really, really successful. And so what we sort of recommend is this idea where maybe you're flying with this airline of choice, and maybe you're a premium member of the airline, maybe you're just flying on the airline. And what you can offer is sort of within that team app, you can get free in-flight entertainment. So this could be full stream games, live or recorded. This can be more digestible things. This can be just like highlights, daily fantasy, sports sort of inspired things. But what we can sort of do by this and like through this partnership, we can sort of bring people to become more digitally engaged with the team. And sort of meeting in, I didn't know that you were going to be here as well, but in the other panel this morning, we sort of talked about meeting fans where they are. And so we identify these very high value segments, and these certainly have room to be more digitally engaged, but even all the fans provided in the data set as a whole have this opportunity as well. And so by sort of creating this digital engagement recommendation, we hope to sort of capture more of the audience overall as well, and again, in a somewhat potentially cheap way that can, create long-lasting partnerships. So as people become digitally engaged with the team and the airline, you can think of all other avenues where maybe you're just watching some highlights in the app, and then you want to go to an away game, and now you can, with your with your official airline sponsor, you can just go right to their website to buy your flight. So in conclusion, we took a look, we clustered the data, we found some high-value fan segments. We ran simulations to understand what the ROI is. We developed an app to sort of explore these trade-offs, and then provided a few different recommendations. And one thing that I do want to go back to is that sometimes the ROI can be hard to estimate in terms of numerical value, but I think some of the strategies and partnerships that we are talking about can really lead to that sort of customer loyalty and retention, which is very important and hard for us to estimate. Sorry?
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Back on? Good. Thank you again for that. Like the cluster approach, I might have missed this, but just on one of the earlier slides around the cluster 2, when it was the uncertainty, I think it was that one. What does this mean, and how does that impact the commercial side of your estimates?
So you're talking about the uncertainty portion?
Yeah.
And so the uncertainty portion represents, we ran, instead of looking at one simulation, we ran thousands of simulations. And so what we want to get is, what's the range of possible outcomes we can expect from cluster 2 and 3? And so these kind of, we ran various simulations varying the parameters. So one of the key parameters we looked at was the loyalty sponsorship, which is a numerical 1 to 10. And we sort of looked at the number of users who have high loyalty, which is like greater than 7. And then we ran various simulations like what's the % conversion rate of these kind of users. And then we want to provide an uncertainty estimate, and so that's what that provides.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so we want a low estimate, we want a conservative estimate, we want a high estimate, we want the mean, the average estimate. So that's kind of
Good.
yeah. Thank you.
Clear.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You can stay there.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. This concludes our open division section, and we will now continue with the student division, and I will welcome the first team up on stage.
Awesome. Thank you guys for being here and listening in. My name is Angad. I'm a senior at Yale studying statistics and data science.
My name is Mickey. I am a senior at NYU studying computer science and math.
And today, we're very excited to tell you about our project, which focused on harnessing the power of fandom for airline sponsorship strategy. And so we're going to walk you through a little bit of background as well as some context and relevant information and give you a little bit of insight into our problem statement. Then we're going to move into our fan segment analysis, which focused on doing some exploratory data analysis and finding some key insights about which fan segments have the most commercial value. Then we'll move into some incremental revenue modeling that we did based off the insights that we had from our fan segment analysis. And lastly, provide you with some sponsorship strategy recommendations and implementation details that we think would be helpful if an airline was to use this program. So firstly, to give you a little bit more background on the situation, popular sports like cricket and soccer have billions of fans all over the world. And with us approaching an age of digitization, the number of fans is only going to increase. Hand in hand with this, in 2024 alone, there were almost 300 airline sponsorship deals, exceeding $1 billion. What's probably most surprising is this is expected to increase at a rate of 9% and be almost triple what it is in 2023 and 2033. The bottom line that this really shows is there's a large opportunity in the airline sports sponsorship industry that we can try to harness to the power of fandom. And so given this relevant context, our problem statement becomes to analyze the potential benefit of an airline sports sponsorship strategy based on fandom. And we broke this up into 3 key parts. One was a fan segment analysis, which involved looking at a data set of 55,000 fans, including their airline patterns, as well as behaviors related to fandom. This helped us explore and identify fan segments with the greatest commercial potential. Secondly, we did some incremental revenue modeling. This helped us calculate estimates around the incremental revenue uplift that we would expect to see from a sponsorship agreement. This also led us to contextualize it with respect to the initial investment that an airline would have to make and do ROI projections. Lastly, we had some implementation details and sponsorship strategy recommendations for airline sponsorships to actually bring this to fruition. And now I'll pass it off to Mickey to talk more about the fan segment analysis.
Awesome. So as far as fan segment analysis, go to the next slide. And the data set had many features, including the fan ID, the frequency of how often a fan flies, the fan social media presence, the fan susceptibility to advertisement, the fan income bracket, as well as many other features. Now, we determined, after our analysis, we found that it's ideal to target the group that earns $150,000 to $200,000. This is because of the high susceptibility rating of 6.5, and additionally, it's because of the frequency of flight, which is roughly on average 20 flights per individual in that group. So with all this information, we're able to calculate that if the airlines just focused on that group directly, they would make over $94 million. And this is from the estimation of, so we would take all the members in that group, multiplying by the distribution of how many flights, or rather of the specific tier of each flight, times the flight of, and that would be multiplied by it's the value of each tier. So for instance, we have an economy flight we estimated at $450, the economy plus at $700, the economy and premium is at $900, and then business class at $3,500. This is all just derived from the research we did. And if we multiply that by the number of flights per year, we get this value of $94 million. And that just shows the commercial value of targeting that specific group. We also found that for users who make over $100,000, and they tend to go to far more games than average, which is ideal for our data set. So we decided to focus on that demographic.
Thanks so much, Mickey. I'll get into some of the revenue modeling that we did based off those insights. And so first we started with a little bit of market research. We wanted to quantify how much does a sponsorship actually impact purchase intent. And we found that according to the European Sponsorship Association, sports sponsorships drove an average of 10% lift in purchase intent. But we also understand that all those people with that lift in purchase intent probably actually didn't end up buying. So we applied a haircut respective to that figure. This table shows the income segment breakdown along with the different seat classes that exist. And as Mickey described in the past slide, the way in which we calculated the revenue that is currently being generated by airlines using the average flights per year, the count in each income class, and the estimated price of each seat. In the revenue column, we can see that 94 million figure, similar to what Mickey presented, as well as for all income classes. And what we did was we took 10% lift from this and also applied our haircut to get numbers and estimates around the incremental revenue shown in the last column. While the total overall income segment groups comes out to around 10 million, it's important to note that again, the 150 to 200K group makes up the largest portion of this. And so this, if anything, reconfirmed our fan segment analysis. Now we wanted to contextualize this, get a sense of what it looks like with respect to the actual investment and what this would take. So we used an initial investment estimate based off previous sponsorship deals of $80 million annually. And this is actually the Emirates deal, which they made. And so the return on investment, we also noticed depended on the size of the fan base that airlines were doing this on. While we had a data set of 55,000 people, fan bases range from 100,000 for small European clubs to millions for NFL teams to hundreds of millions for giant sports clubs across the country, or across the world, sorry. And so we noticed that as the size of the fan base increases, the potential ROI from just this 150 to 200K segment and from all income segments becomes more promising. We also realized with the specific example of 55,000 fans, if an airlines wanted to implement a strategy based on this, they would break even using the 150K to 200K income segment group with a target fan base of around 1 million. And teams that would fall into this range, to be a little bit more directed with the advice we'd want to give them, would be small MLS, NFL, or club teams. And now I'll hand it back to Mickey to talk a little bit about the recommendations based off an analysis.
Awesome, thank you. So as far as recommendations, we have some few strategies. For the next slide. So the first thing would be we have exclusive flight showings, or rather exclusive game showings on flights. So if you're traveling, you would be able to watch past or previous games of your favorite team, and this would be all via the sponsorship. Additionally, we would have the opportunity of team interaction. So either the sponsorship would be able to place their logo on either the jersey or the stadium or somewhere in the stadium, which is common today amongst for instance, the Emirates and the NBA have an agreement like that. So an opportunity to to create traction for the brand and to it's all about it's getting your name out there and create that relationship with fans. Additionally, we want to target high value games via the media. So either on TV we could sponsor playoff games or or games that are games that have high viewerships. And this is valuable for a number of reasons, including with the younger fans. So the point here is that we want to foster a relationship even with fans who can't necessarily afford flights yet, but because as some of them become higher income earners, they're able to associate they can associate themselves with that airline, and be via the team and the sponsorship. So it's about building the relationship early, and then as you become a higher income earner, you're able to ideally we could convert on some of those flights. And lastly, we would have the opportunity of fan incentivization. So we want to make programs where if you buy a certain amount of flights, You're able to meet some players, or you'll be entered in auctions. It's a way to pretty much like award you for your purchasing of flights, and a way to incentivize you to keep purchasing. And then also, we would also recommend that the sponsor have, they could potentially, if they want to build some traction for the brand and increase visibility, they could have some sections in stadiums. Like for instance, MSG, they have the Delta Sky Club, something like that. It's a way to increase visibility and traction for a brand. And before we end, I just want to thank you, the Watchman Foundation, for sponsoring the hackathon, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you both. It was really good. The question I have around like the ROI modeling, you mentioned around some of the key takeaways, the increasing the fan base. What approaches do you think would work in terms of how you increase your fan base overall to drive the ROI up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think like we kind of looked at the different range of fan bases that exist, and it seems like the really big airlines tend to get the partnerships with the really big teams. And so I think entering one way to get like smaller airlines' names out there would be a sort of consortium. So if you have a big airlines like Emirates, partnering with them or bringing them on, if that initially means like taking less of the % of the revenue, but just to get like involved in those larger fan bases, or even have like events to foster awareness, whether it's like some teams have very isolated practice spaces or may not have ones that are as accessible, and so having flights directly that go there as compared to other flights where you might have to travel from the airport there. So those are just a couple of ways I think that might help with visibility and accessing these higher fan bases.
Yeah, thanks again, guys. And on this slide as well, when you're doing this, more of a question back to you just on your opinion, but when you're doing this and using the Emirates example, you're kind of looking at this saying that potentially their partnerships are really undervalued.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess further to that, like how would you go about going shopping for the next one that you could get the best value from for an Emirates if that was your client, for example?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on the client itself. How, like it's the scope of what we're talking about, and what exactly the goal here shared. Yes, like from our estimation, we do believe it is undervalued, but at the end of the day, there's so much value to it. Even if it's undervalued, the opportunity to partner with the sports franchise, you might not get all the value initially, but you have the opportunity to grow, which is something that I think is valued.
I think something I wanted to add also is it's almost like a little bit of a gamble when you buy into a team, because there's a low barrier to entry, but a lot of times it might not end up working out. And so I think investing in teams early, for example, I think like Formula One released that they're doing an 11th team this morning with Cadillac. And so like I'm sure there's plenty of sponsors trying to buy in there just because of how lucrative the market is. So finding smaller teams to invest in, because you can have trade-offs in terms of player performance, team performance, and for the airline as well.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you to the first team of our student division. Now introducing the second team.
Hi everyone, how's it going? My name is Isabel Gallucci. I am a senior at the University of Wisconsin. I'm studying data science.
Hi, I'm Adya. I'm doing my master's at University of Illinois in computer science. And the brief was that we are trying to sell a sponsorship to an airline through a sports team. So the first thing we thought of was that we know which fans are highly influenced by sponsorships, and we want to find them, know more about them, and use them to sell this sponsorship to the airline. So first, we identified the characteristics of the fans that are highly influenced by sponsorship. Then we identified which of these groups would be a key target audience by grouping them together and then providing suggestions to increase the return on investment for the airline, as well as some actionable strategies as to how you can maintain long-term success with this kind of deal. So first, the reason we chose to classify this data instead of using a clustering model or something else that we tried was because we wanted our decisions to be explainable and provide concrete insights on our thinking to the airline as well. So we used a decision tree classifier. To do that, first, we converted all the categorical variables to numerical ones, and then we standardized the scale of the features. So after that, we had to decide what are the labels that we're going to use to do this classification. We had the influence of sponsorship on a scale of 1 to 10 for the fan base. What we did was we grouped that into 3. Anything less than 5 is people who are not that influenced by sponsorships. Between 5 and 8 would be people who might be influenced by something like that. And anyone over 8 was influenced by sponsorship, according to us. So after that, we found out that the class in the middle, who may be influenced, was almost twice the size as compared to the other 2 classes. So we downsampled that class for better training and more robustness. And we also did some hyperparameter tuning for the tree depth and the loss functions. These are the results that we got. I won't go too in depth into them, but you can see the main inferences. One is fans with higher incomes, which was more than $100,000, are more likely to be influenced by sponsorships. And the second group we identified was newer and younger fans. Even though they're not earning that much, they are much more likely to be influenced by new sponsors and their team influence. So next we'll highlight some insights.
Yeah, so the plots that you see here are basically just verifications of what our model was already telling us. On the left, you can see that the number of flights taken by fans in the data grows pretty substantially as the income bracket increases, which goes with our previous result of higher income fans being influenced by sponsorship. On the left side, or on the right side, excuse me, you can see that among the fans who are influenced by sponsorship, the distribution skews very much to the left of younger fans. This brings us to the 2 key target audiences that we wanted to suggest. The first of which being younger, newer fans who are more social media engaged. The values, the decimal values that you see above those are just correlation metrics that we found from the model. The 2 negative ones just show that as the age or the length of fandom, or how long they have been a fan of the team increases, the likelihood of them to be influenced by sponsorship is going to decrease, and their social media use shows a positive correlation with sponsorship influenceability. On the right, the second audience would be fans with a higher income, a history of airline loyalty status, and those who fly more frequently, all of which show positive correlations with sponsorship influence from our model. The 2 recommendations for how to target these audiences, the first of which being for those who are younger, is to just increase presence on social media. A lot of young people are on social media. Millions of users are on there. It's a lot of eyes on your brand. It's a lot of eyes on your team and the airline. So meet them where they are. Directly engage with the fans on the places that they frequent all the time. I was on Instagram this morning for longer than I should have been. Ways they can do this are influencer marketing, advertising friends and family group discounts on social media, and my preference would be ticket giveaways. If I'm buying a flight and I see that my team is offering a chance to win free game tickets or free match tickets when I'm purchasing a flight, I'm taking that opportunity every second I can. I love to go to games, but I also really like to be able to buy groceries. So it's really, I'm jumping on that opportunity every chance I have. For higher income fans, the goal with this suggestion was to really just maximize the quality of their experience when they're maybe traveling to away games, or maybe want to make maybe want to have a little bit more of a better time when they're traveling for matches or for games of that nature. And so offering a package with that would be, I think, the most beneficial for how much money they're already spending. including the game tickets, a hotel stay with a welcome kit of their team's merchandise, transportation to and from the venue are all hypothetical things that could be included in this. In terms of ROI, we wanted to have the key assumptions when calculating this and just specify the ways that we would weight fan segments when doing this calculation. For key assumptions, we assumed that influencing by sponsorship will boost both frequency and value of the number of flights that are bought. And we also want to assume that travel demand and fan behavior remain pretty consistent over time, so that the data can be, so that the calculation can be done more accurately. In terms of weighting the fans, we would assign higher weights for fan segments with more premium travel history, so people who are in business class or first class, or a higher loyalty tier, that's the same idea. And this is just focusing on a long-term customer lifetime value. We want this to be a sustainable strategy that's beneficial for both the airline and the team equally. In terms of performance metrics that could be monitored in order to track if there's going to be a return on investment, monitoring just revenue growth and flight metrics, seeing if the number of flights per year actually does increase, alongside customer conversion and loyalty, seeing if this new key target audience that you're getting is actually being converted from non-loyalty members to the higher airline tiers, seeing if they do decide to buy a premium economy or a business class ticket as opposed to the economy ticket. Tracking that change would be an indicator of success, and as well as retention rates, seeing if there's repeat purchase behavior, and which would be an ideal customer lifetime value. To conclude, this whole project basically starts with, in order to expand your audience, you need to know who the audience is and where they are. Young and social media savvy customers and high income customers, they're two very different sides of the same spectrum, but they're all fans. They're all just wanting to have the best experience possible and enjoy rooting for their teams. And we hope to have provided ways to do that for you. Thank you for your time. And thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you both. You mentioned around younger fans are more likely to be influenced by sponsorship. Why do you think that is?
I believe that, like it was highlighted previously, I feel younger people are more open to change sometimes, and they are less set in their ways. So I would sometimes, even out of spite of my rival team, not buy the products they are selling, even though they might be good, because that's just not my team, right? So they care less about the brands that they currently use than people who've been using it for 30 years, 40 years, because they're more open to new things.
Thanks again, and thought the recommendations that you had, I thought were quite good in terms of how to connect with those audiences. With a specific kind of return on investment, did you guys work anything out on like broadly what would be the selling point to a brand? Like you've got good ways of activating, I thought, but was there like a monetary figure that you thought, well, this could be the big opportunity for you if you partner with this team?
I think if we had more time, that would have probably been the next thing we did. Yeah.
So other than time, what other piece of information or pieces would you have wanted? So as you went through this, you laid out, built your decision tree. What did you say, dang, I really wish we knew this? As the data fell out. It was very clear as you laid out kind of those 2 points to focus on, but
yeah,
just
so
curious.
I think one thing as for the ROI calculation and the money value that we were looking at, if we had concrete values on how much they're spending along with how often they're traveling, and if the loyalty programs are with one airline versus they try to sample from different airlines according to the value they're getting.
Yeah.
Just understanding this more from a flying perspective, which I guess a sports team may not always have, but given the amount of data we had, I think we tried to present everything we had with it.
Yeah, fair enough. And then one last build on Tom's question. So for those two audiences, the younger and then the higher income, greater traveler, what would your split be? 50-50 in terms of targeting them, or would you have targeted one more than the other? And if I missed that in there, I apologize, but.
No, so I believe that it's not that these two classes are completely distinct, because a lot of young people are also in that high income bracket. So I feel you could focus and start with that easy to reach high income business people who are able to go to a lot of games and all. But the one that would have the most potential would be the younger fans, because they would grow with your brand over the years and you will be able to get a lot more long-term value out of them.
Yeah, lifetime value might be greater, right? Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you to our second team in the student division, and now I will introduce our very last team to the stage.
Hello everybody, my name is Steven Fellinger. I am a senior at the University of Miami, and today me and my teammate Harsh Shakar, who is a master's student at Johns Hopkins, are going to talk about how targeting business travelers and diehard/frequent matchgoers is best for airline commercial success. So quickly going over our agenda, we're going to start with our methodology and then go into our 5 key insight categories, talking about fan segments, activation strategies, digital engagement, sponsorship, and how we're going to measure our return on investment. Finishing off, just quickly going over our references and a couple of appendices graphs.
So the teams have already talked about what data we had, but I'll go over it briefly, which is we had fan demographics, 50,000 rows of fans. What demographic are they from? Data about sports and data about their airline travel history, we could phrase it as. And we wanted to do 3 things to tackle this data into a researchable problem. The first one is finding the important variables out of all the data variables that we had. The second thing was do data analysis based off of those variables and try and get insights of groups and subgroups. And the third one was do market research based on the insights from the 2 points mentioned above. So looking at the fan segments, we did categorical boosting, which is a variation of XG boosting, which deals with numerical and categorical data. And what we found was these 5 variables, which is income brackets, match attendance per season ticket holders, airline loyalty tiers, and flights per year were the 5 most important variables when deciding how much is a person going to spend on merchandise. So we chose merchandise mainly because that was the only financial metric we had to compare things against, and we categorized it as low if they're spending under $100 and high otherwise. And what we found was income bracket is 3 times as likely to be important than any other variable mentioned above. So that's a focus that we'll use going forward.
So going off of those variables now, we decided to try to find which fan styles have the best metrics for these 5 most important categories. And we found that diehard locals and regular matchgoers should be our target demographic because they are nearly 2 times as likely to make $100,000 or more. They attend 3 times as many sports matches. They were the only fan types that are more likely to have season tickets than not. They were nearly 2 times as likely to have a paid airline loyalty tier, that being silver, gold, or platinum. They take on average 1 more flight per year, and while not one of the categories, I think something important in the context of this data, they were the 2 fan styles most likely to be influenced by sponsorship. Moving on to our activation strategy in terms of if we're going to be targeting more of our business travelers or leisure travelers, we decided to really focus on our business travelers for 3 main reasons. For one, they travel more frequently. As you can see in the images on the left side of the screen, the vast majority of leisure travelers traveled either annually or biannually. Meanwhile, every single business traveler in the data set traveled at least 4 times a year. Additionally, it was easier to convert business travelers between airline loyalty tiers. Something that me and Harsh, I think, found the most interesting potentially in the data set is there was a one-to-one relationship between airline loyalty tier and flight frequency in terms of leisure travelers, meaning every single annual traveler did not have a loyalty tier. Every single biannual traveler had a basic loyalty tier, and so on. Meanwhile, while the majority of business travelers that traveled quarterly, again, the least amount of travel for business travelers, did not have an airline loyalty tier, there were people that had basic and silver, proving to us it's easier to convert business travelers between loyalty tiers and get them to upgrade. And lastly, with the 2 visuals we can see on the right-hand side of the screen, in general, business travelers have higher incomes averaging around the 100 to 150K income group compared to leisure travelers more being in the 50 to 75K airline group. And one last thing, we're going to go over in the appendix as well. We just didn't have the room for the visuals here, unfortunately. But business travelers are also bigger sports fans. Even though they make up only 18% of the data, they make up 50% of people spending $200 or more on merchandise and 60% of people spending $500 or more on merchandise and attend on average 3 more sporting events a year.
So we know business people spend more, make more, go to more games, and travel more. So how can we incentivize that and make the whole process for them as efficient as possible? So we came up with 5 solutions based upon market research, which is creating a business class travel bundle, which offers luxurious away game experiences and packages such as 5-star hotels, flight upgrades, VIP experiences. Similarly, priority travel and premium access to help them save time with priority check-ins, early stadium check-ins. We can award frequent traveler loyalty rewards, which give them loyalty points, bonus miles, discounts on upgrades, and so on. Similarly, giving them customizable tiered packages gives them a personable experience, which can help them with premium seating or exclusive meet and greets, which would not be available otherwise. And finally, corporate partnerships could be leveraged to, let's say, take a team on a holiday with a discounted price or as a bonus towards the company. So how I would classify this as using these 5 techniques, you get convenience, you save time, you incentivize future travels, you save money today individually, and you save money as a group. So one aspect we looked at was the digital engagement side of things, and what we found really interesting was that it's 10 times more likely that a person is a social media follower but not an app user than being an app user but not a social media follower. So our goal was to try and find how can we incentivize and raise the floor of people engaging in digital activities. And some things we focused on were social media linked travel rewards. So let's say you're traveling somewhere, and if you follow that team on their social media, you get a discount. Similarly, enhancing airline sponsorship integrations. So we know most sports teams have airline partners, so they should advertise more in-game through advertisements, social media campaigns, and exclusive travel incentives to boost fan participation. Similarly, in-stadium and in-game engagements by using contests, big screen challenges, and QR codes could make the whole experience more interactive between the teams and the fans. Similarly, to incentivize new app users, we can use app download incentives such as bonuses and exclusive content, travel discount, loyalty points to get people to join more. And finally, the goal is to create a seamless and in-person connection, seamless digital and in-person connection, which means the digital experience should be an extension of your experience and not something that's a hindrance or away from your experience in the stadium or on the flight.
Moving on to our sponsorship plans. A lot of these ideas we got through market research, especially in European football, because a lot of those clubs are more likely to have airline sponsorships. So we were trying to find research of activations that are already going on to kind of reference our ideas. Something to note is a lot of our plans with the sponsorship is going to be more on trying to upgrade someone, so trying to get someone that already has a paid airline loyalty tier to jump up, meaning silver to gold, gold to platinum. The reason for this is because people that do not have an airline loyalty tier, and again, we'll show this in the appendix, just didn't have the room, unfortunately, they are on average 1 point less likely to be influenced by sponsorship compared to the people that have already an airline loyalty tier. So we didn't think sponsorships would necessarily impact their decision making as much. So what exactly we're going to be doing? We're going to be offering exclusive airline perks tied to in-game attendance or merchandise purchases to try to incentivize members to engage with both the airline and the teams. We're also going to be providing season ticket holders with elite airline perks such as priority boarding, extra miles, or travel discounts, and then encouraging them to refer their non-loyalty friends and family through a Bring a Fan Earn Rewards type program. And lastly, we're going to enhance brand affinity and drive conversions by integrating airlines seamlessly into the fan journey through team-branded flights, in-game activations, and exclusive travel experiences.
And finally, how would you measure the return on investment? We have categorized this into 3 different segments. The first one is directly, which is comparing the cost of sponsorship to the spending growth amongst new and existing users by looking into the airline loyalty sign-up programs that they offer. The second one is the fan sentiment. So looking at fan engagement through QR codes, in-app signups, and contest participation. Also, earned media exposure and sponsorship viability and availability. Comparing these two would give a nice idea of what the fans feel about the brand of the sports team as well as the airline. And finally, looking at long-term investment rate, we can see rebooking rates and increased spendings. And we can also compare airline market share because even though it does not directly affect the airline market share, the underlying sentiments towards brand loyalty may be increasing, which helps support it indirectly. So these things can be used to compare the return on investments depending on what the flight or the flight company actually wants to implement.
So what are our biggest takeaways? For starters, we're going to be targeting die-hard locals, regular matchgoers, and business travelers by providing activations that really target these demographics. We're also going to be providing seamless activations connecting social media with in-person rewards, rewarding frequent traveling and high-spending sports fans. And last, we're going to be measuring our return on investment based off of loyalty program, social media, and overall airline company growth, specifically assessing metrics that would focus on return on sponsorship, earned media exposure, and rebooking rates. Really quickly, these are our references, and these were the 3 appendices that I referenced earlier. This is basically how we determined that die-hard fans and regular matchgoers are our best fans to target. This shows kind of what I was mentioning earlier, why we're going to be targeting people that already have an airline loyalty tier. And this shows why we were focusing on business travelers as a whole. Thank you very much. We're now happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both. That was great. I just wanted to ask, one of the points that you made is around incentivizing fans to become app users. And why do you think that's important?
So like we said, the whole thing is about creating an experience that's seamless. So let's say you enter a stadium and you want to buy a hot dog during halftime, right? So you can do it using the app. When you interact using the app, you can get points based off of that, which you can then use towards your airline services, such as points or discounts or however you want to phrase that. So we believe the digital integration works both ways, which is bringing the sport closer to the airline and bringing the airline closer to the sport. And the fan doesn't have to do much except use the app itself. So it benefits them both ways.
And something just to quickly add on to that, we're going to start with really focusing on the social media since more of our members in the data set use the social media. And that may even just look like promoting the app on social media, saying on like an Instagram post or a Twitter or whatever post saying, hey, here's the app, here are all the awesome things you can get through it, here's why you should download it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about prioritization. You had a lot of options for activation there, but in those very distinct buckets. So is your prioritization, you would start with social media?
We would, yeah.
You would? Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. That was
So
great.
just to
Go
clarify the prioritization point, social media is definitely one of them, but we are looking at diehard fans and regular fan matchgoers. So those would be the person segments, and digital would be mainly for everyone because every age group or every fan interacts differently. So these are the 2 segments we mainly want to target, yes.
Yeah, but in terms of the actual tactic, so targeting, totally understand.
Yes.
In terms of the tactic, it would be social first?
Oh, yeah.
It would be social first, but the end goal is to try to get a holistic idea where the app users are also our social media users, are the people that are
That's
also
right.
traveling, are the people that are also attending.
No,
these
you were
photo
clear on
events.
the ecosystem, so that's good.
Okay.
All right, yeah.
So a bit of this depends on how the airline actually wants to work together and build a strategy out of it. So yes, digital is one of them, but then depends on what they are prioritizing. And again, we can work together and decide how it benefits them and
Yeah.
everyone else. So yeah, it'll depend a bit on that.
Did you do any estimates? I know you couldn't, there's a lot to do in a short period of time, but any estimates on pulling this all of the way through, like what type of conversion you would need throughout kind of the various levels of activation that you teed up?
So I've done market research, and that's in the references listed above. The thing with pulling estimates was we had different geographies, we had different segments, and we did not have personalized data enough. So it was really difficult for us to make an estimate and generalize it over the whole world.
Yep.
So we chose to stick with the data, and if there's an opportunity present, we can definitely look into that. But we chose to stay true to the data we had instead of making assumptions and going in that direction.
Yep, fair enough. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this concludes the presentations of the Hackathon final. Thank you again for all the presentations. It's really amazing to see what insights and ideas you came up with in only 6 to 7 hours. The judges will now discuss and evaluate and come to a decision. And as mentioned earlier, the decision will be announced at our Alpha Awards tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. I hope you enjoy the conference.